just say a couple of thoughts about that. I mean, I think that, so first of all, uh, yeah, I mean, you look at Jazz Jennings' mom, that's absolutely how she, but then you look at her dad, and Jazz's dad, here they are, the surgery's botched. I just watched some of the video from it. The surgery's botched, and the dad's kind of like, well, yeah, it didn't quite go like we thought it was. What I have heard when I talk to the parents of the detransitioners and the desisters. The desisters, of course, are the parents that saved their kids before real danger was done. What they say is they go, often the dad was finally like, I don't want to do this. The dad
Yeah.
had to step in and say no and perform that role that traditionally, I'm not saying
That's
every
what
case.
dads do.
That's what
the
dads are
role
supposed to
of
do.
dads. Yeah.
They're supposed to be like, no.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. And then but then also just you pull back even further and you go, what is this really about? Look what they're doing. They're blocking puberty. Puberty is a fundamental human right. Growing up is a fundamental human right. They're depriving people of the right to be an adult.
That's what the witch in Snow White does.
That's so interesting.
That is, it's a standard form of female pathology, which is that's how you eliminate competitors. Right. Oh yeah, no kidding. It's really bad. Well, it's the story of Snow White is that she's the most beautiful, which means she's fecund and she's at her peak, but the next generation is coming and she's going to be supplanted. And so instead of accepting that gracefully and making the transition to grandmother, which is what she should do, she attempts to prolong her youthful adulthood beyond its acceptable point, and she does that by sacrificing the up-and-coming next feminine generation. Exactly. So she poisons Snow White. Yeah. She's the witch that lives in the forest and has always lived in the forest. Yes.
Well, so the witch is in power. I mean,
brutal,
this is what's so shocking about it is that the witch is in power, like across all these institutions, and the men are completely, simped out. I don't know how else to describe it. The men have abdicated their authority, abdicated their responsibility, the core responsibility of the father at a minimum. All these dads are focused on playing with their kids. Protect your kids. Protect your kids from these deeply creepy doctors that are trying to prey on your child. I mean, it gets to the spiritual stuff too, I think, because I watched the Barbara Walters special on Jazz Jennings before they performed this horrible surgery on her. Barbara Walters opens that special. Barbara Walters, the trusted face of the news media, right? I mean, she's like Walter Cronkite is dead, but Barbara Walters is still there. Someone like my parents, my family would rely on. She gets up and she goes, "Beautiful little girl, born into the wrong body." I mean, I've been working on nihilism and the ways in which nihilism is when you are sterilizing your children, when you are depriving them sexual function, when you are denying them puberty, you are just, it's nihilism. I mean, you're just saying no to life. You're negating life. You're negating your own immortality project. That's how a lot of people feel like their lives have meaning. It goes on by having kids and then grandkids. So the hard nihilism of it, and underneath it is a kind of hedonism of the immediate pleasure of exercising your power over other people's bodies or your body. I think that nihilism is at the heart of this. I just look at it and I go, nihilism, in the Nietzschean sense and the classical sense, is just a kind of rejection of reality for some alternative world.
Sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health. You must have a consistent nighttime routine to function at your best. If you're struggling with sleep, you need to check out Beam. It's not just your run-of-the-mill sleep aid. It's a concoction carefully crafted to help you rest without the grogginess that often accompanies other sleep remedies. Several people on our team use Beam's Dream Powder to sleep better through the night and show up ready for work. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains a powerful, all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Now available in delicious flavors like cinnamon cocoa, chocolate peanut butter, and mint chip. Better sleep has never tasted better. And today, our listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. Their science-backed, healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, and enjoy before bedtime. If you find yourself struggling to sleep, give it a shot. Get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Peterson and use code Peterson at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Peterson and use code Peterson for 40% off.
Yeah, well, you remember Nietzsche concentrated. See, he didn't stop with nihilism, right? He pursued that into resentment, which is so I would say your concentration on nihilism is insufficiently pessimistic, because nihilism is a step on the way to resentment, right? And resentment, man, if you're looking for a cardinal sin, resentment it's a contender. It's a contender for what's at the bottom. Resentment, arrogance, and deceit. Those make one evil triad. Well, we were talking about power. The reason I brought up the infants to begin with is because there's this unholy relationship between power and hedonism, because I will turn to power to gratify my hedonism, because I don't have to otherwise. Like if I can invite you to play along with me and you want to, well, I don't need to use power. The only time I need power is when I want you to do something that you don't want to do. And worse than that, I want you to do something that isn't going to be good for you in the medium to long run, that's also not going to be good for me. Because one of the things I've been looking into, for example, is the personality structure of short-term maters. So like human beings are a pair bonding species that invest heavily in their offspring. But within the human realm, there are like temperamental long-term maters and, let's say, temperamental short-term maters. And you might say, well, who are the one-night stand crowd? So these are the hedonists. Well, we know what their personality characteristics are because it's been studied. Narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian, and that wasn't enough. So after studying those three for 7 or 8 years, the relevant psychologist added sadism, because that's where it ends up. And so you get this unholy dynamic of, part of that is the inevitable dynamic between hedonism and force, is that if you're going to pursue short-term hedonistic ends, then force will enter into it. I just rewatched Cabaret. Remember Cabaret?
Oh, sure.
It's so bloody brilliant because you see this cabaret where all the transsexuals are, by the way, and Lisa Minnelli, who's the cluster B wannabe actress narcissist, and they're dancing away madly, having their hedonistic orgy, and the Nazis are in the audience. And it's so interesting. Joel Gray does a lovely job of this because the hedonists they're in a dance with the Nazis, and I think both of them know it.
Yeah. And
we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing now. We are doing exactly the same thing.
I mean, this is where I was headed too. I mean, this is how you get totalitarianism. It's if you read Political Ponerology, this really interesting book on the psychology of totalitarianism, he argues that totalitarianism is defined by the narcissists and the psychopaths taking over every major institution in society and emerging from the bottom up. The narcissist, there's power is exercised, I think, in those two ways. The psychopath is through raw power. It's through bullying, being domineering, trying to get people canceled, trying to get people fired, harassment. The narcissist, I'm borrowing from the Ponerology book. I think the last name is pronounced Lobachewski. He argues that the narcissists are spellbinders. So they're casting a spell. I mean, speaking of the witch, right? There's a spell cast. And so I think there's like a trance that has come over, it comes over individuals. It's cast by these really charismatic trans leaders, and they sort of mesmerize, hypnotize, put people in a sort of particular state. Seduce,
yes, definitely.
Yeah, and then everybody, our brainwaves get to some level or whatever, and then anybody who veers outside of it and goes, wait a second, this doesn't seem right, then they're there with the bully to keep them in line and make an example of them and scapegoat them in order to create this culture of fear and conformity. So, and we see it in the files. I mean, the files themselves are so chilling. Like, if you were just a scholar of totalitarianism, we spend so much time talking about, those studies that were done in the 50s, the electroshock studies or the prison Stanford experiments. Read these files. You want to see what totalitarianism looks like. Somebody says, hey, maybe we should take a minute and think about whether or not to give drugs and surgery to somebody that has multiple personalities or that's been misdiagnosed.
No, we'll just get consent from each personality.
That's right. The alters.
Right. Oh my God.
And so then somebody goes, maybe why don't we have why don't we actually maybe pause about or think about it, and then there's somebody in the room, in the chat room or the message board saying, oh, how dare you gatekeep? How dare you create barriers to providing this health care just because they happen to have multiple personalities? I mean, it is so crazy. You kind of can't even believe that it's actually happened. Like, if you were to make a Hollywood movie out of the WPATH files, I think you would be like, this is not realistic. Like, this would not be able to occur in today's society. And yet here we are. It's not just occurring.
Now you know firsthand why the Germans didn't wake up in the late 1930s.
Yeah.
It's because they couldn't believe it. They literally couldn't. Now, first of all, they didn't want to believe it, and they put their heads in the sand. But but they also couldn't believe it. There's no way. There's no way that can be happening, and you can understand
and I was there.
Why.
I was there. I mean, I was there like a year or two ago, being like, this can't be true, because if it were true, then we are
Someone
already
would do
living
something about it.
Yeah, or somebody would do something about it, or it would mean that we're living in a totalitarian society already. It would mean that the medical institutions, that it's like a horror. It's like that thing in the horror movie. You get to the middle of the horror movie and you discover everybody's brain has been taken over by the aliens, or it's actually a secret brain swapping exercise. There's some horror in the middle of it, and then you have to figure out how to get out of it. Which is I think where we are now. So that's what
we're on to. Well, okay. So let's approach that in two directions. Okay. So now one of the things you pointed out. So the manifestation of the narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian sadist is different in men than women. Okay, so in men, it tends to be more, get the hell out of my way or I will definitely hurt you. Like, it's really in your face. With women, it's much more subtle. It's much more behind the scenes. They're much more manipulative, and the proclivity of the female antisocial type is to reputation savage and to gossip. And now there's a big, so tell me what you think about this. So first, it's very difficult to fight against that. So like, women can't fight other women who do that. It's very hard for them to do that. But men also can't fight, because the thing is, if I figure out that you're a psychopath and you're interacting with me and you're manipulating me, I can actually punch you. And there's a high likelihood of that if you push it. Right. And that's one of the things that regulates social interaction between men. It's like, don't push your luck. Not too far. But that wave is barred 100% for women against women, or virtually 100%, and even more so against men. And so men, I believe that men have abdicated their responsibility to say no. But I have a certain sympathy because, for example, I've had clients who were unfortunate enough to take up residence, for example, with a woman with cluster B psychopathology. And it was like their lives were over. Those women would light themselves on fire to singe them. And they had no defenses. And if they did ever raise a hand in defense of any sort, then the cluster B type would call the authorities, lie about what had happened, invite a knight in shining armor to save her in tears, which is really effective as she also happens to be attractive. And that guy was done. He was done. His life was over. Right. Yeah, his little dried up corpse was being sucked dry by the psychopathic woman on the side of the road, and that was it.
Right.
So that's a big problem. And so that's another.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. No, I was going to say. I mean, I think it seems like we're turning a little bit to how do we handle this. I mean, I think that one of the things that the Lobachewski describes in the Ponerology book, and of course it's just a theory because he couldn't prove it. By the way, he lived through Nazism and communism. He opens the book describing a really lousy academic being appointed as the president of his university in Poland. And the guy was just a psychopath. Like, that's how he made it to that position. And what Lobachewski's argument is...
That could never happen, Michael.
Okay. No, I know you're reading it being like, I think we're there.
Yeah, no kidding.
So-
We're definitely there.
We're definitely there. So you kind of go,